For those of you that don't know me, my name's Chad Steffen. I'm the Emergency Services Captain in the Goodhue County Sheriff's Office. And my job is to oversee operations, emergency management operations, emergency communications operations to include our 911 center. And then, of course, other duties as assigned, as the sheriff likes to say. So I'm kind of a jack of all trade guy, so I kind of get in the weeds on all kind of tech things as well for the office, so to which I enjoy. But today, we're going to kind of focus on dispatch. That's what the ask was. So if anyone has any questions, shoot them at me. I love taking questions. I like engaging with that. So, with that being said, we'll carry on here. Let's see. I'm going to mute this because it rings all the time. Public safety answering point. Has anyone heard that term?
No.
So a public safety answering point is a 911 center, okay? Commonly referred to as PSAP. This is what the federal government calls any location that answers a 911 call, a public safety answering point. So in Goodhue County, our public safety answering point, or our 911 center, is a 24/7 operation. They answer all calls within the geographical boundaries of Goodhue County, both 911 and non-emergency calls. So if you call the sheriff's office or you call the non-emergency dispatch number, it rings into our public safety answering point. And so we provide full-time dispatching services to 6 different law enforcement agencies in Goodhue County and 7 different fire departments and 2 ambulance services. Okay? So you'll see for the area here, certainly Cannon Falls Police Department, we provide dispatch services for. Same with Cannon Falls Fire Department, along with Cannon Falls Ambulance Service as well. And so the Sheriff's Office provides 911 dispatching services to our municipal and tribal partners free of charge. Okay? We say free of charge because statutorily, the county does not have to provide dispatching services. By statute, counties only have to answer a 911 call and inform that agency with jurisdiction that they have a call. Nothing more, nothing less, right? So by the dispatching services, we provide all the systems to keep track of those calls, typically known as the computer-aided dispatch system, all the documentation, checking on the status of officers that are in the field, stuff like that.
Do you have a good working relationship with TRIAD? I mean, back and forth?
I think we do, yeah. You know, I should just give a little bit brief history on my role. I was a tribal police officer for 16 years. 2 years of that were full-time. That's where I started my career, out in southwestern Minnesota for a tribe. And then I remained part-time for the other 16 years. I even served 9 months as a police chief before I left there, came back home to the Red Wing Police Department. I was with Red Wing Police Department for 12 years before I came over to the Sheriff's Office. And to give you a little bit more history, I was a dispatcher right here in Cannon Falls in the public safety building when they had their own dispatch. And so when I graduated high school, and I won't give the year because I'll date myself already, even though I'm sure I'm much younger, but yeah, I was in college and I was working 32 hours a week down here at the public safety building as a dispatcher. So it is kind of neat. And I do have a story because someone asked, tell me about some calls, maybe funny or otherwise. So I have one actually. So yeah, and so that's kind of my history there. And because of that tribal government partnership, or my experience, I've been able to relate and work really well with them, certainly on all things emergency communications. And to be honest, I really enjoy it. And so I worked with them even prior to becoming the role I'm in. So yeah, it's been very beneficial. All right, with that said, I'm going to throw another term at you, Emergency Communication Center. Okay, what is that? It's the same thing as a 911 center. It's the same thing as a public safety answering point. Typically today, we call our dispatch center the Emergency Communication Center because that's what happens there, right? So our PSAP, Public Safety Answering Report, is the same as our Emergency Communication Center, is the same as the 911 dispatch center. It's all the terminology and who you talk to, right? But in our dispatch center, we provide relay dispatching for 5 additional fire departments and that have emergency service zones in Goodhue County. That includes Hastings, Meesville, Randolph, Mazeppa, and Nerstrand fire departments. We also provide relay dispatching for 5 ambulance services that have jurisdiction, what we refer to as emergency services zones in Goodhue County, for Lake City, Mayo Hospital Ambulance, North or End Health Ambulance, Northfield Ambulance, and West Concord Ambulance. Again, the Sheriff's Office does that free of charge to those partners of ours. Is that a surprise to anyone? All those different agencies? Okay? And so next couple slides, I'll talk about emergency service zones and how we figure out who's supposed to go to what, right? But I just want to touch base on some cool mapping solutions that are coming to our dispatch centers today. One of them is called Rapid SOS. And what Rapid SOS does is it's a free web browser-based program or application that's available to all 911 centers in the nation. And what this does is if you have a cell phone, I would imagine most of you do, if it's an Apple or Google phone, when you dial 911, that actual lat and long of your exact location is shared on the screen to our 911 dispatchers, and it pins you right on a map right where you're at. And every 10 seconds that updates. So if you're walking down the street talking on 911, we'll have what I call a little breadcrumb trail on the map of you moving every 10 seconds. Very, very cool technology, right? We all know that 911 certainly has came a long way, but location-based and how to locate people has been leaps and bounds, you know. And by having someone who has an Apple phone or a Google phone, like a Samsung or something like that, that data is very precise. And so here's me calling 911 last month when I updated this slide, sitting at my office. And in fact, my chair is about right where it is on that map. And so it's very accurate, it's pretty cool. And it will even tell us the altitude, you know, above sea level, of course. But it will give us, you know, uncertainty radius. It's 90% confident that it's within 16 meters of where it plots on the map. And so way, way, way better than it used to be. So that's kind of cool. Okay. So I mentioned emergency service zones. Okay, we refer to them as ESNs. And an ESN means emergency service number zone. So we take this big old map, and while I only have our law enforcement partners on here, the whole county is divided up. In fact, the whole nation is divided up in emergency services zones. Who responds for law enforcement, who responds for fire, and who responds for EMS, right? Those are the 3 emergency service zones. So as you all know, Goodhue County is made up of 780 square miles, 26 of those of which are rivers and lakes. Our estimated population as of 2023 is 48,035. And the county is actually broken up into 42 different ESN zones to better serve the public, right? And those zones help determine which emergency services respond to a given location. Because it is possible that over here in, say, Mazeppa, right, down in this area, it might be Mazeppa Fire Department, but it's Zimbrota Ambulance, and depending on which county it might determine if it's Wabasha County Sheriff's Office or Goodhue County Sheriff's Office. And so when a person calls 911, or the dispatcher enters the address of a location into their computer-aided dispatch software, the system is built out to tell them, based on that location, here's the law enforcement agencies who has jurisdiction, here's the fire department who has jurisdiction, and here's the EMS agency that has jurisdiction. And sometimes it's 3 different agencies going to the same call. When I say 3 different agencies, I mean it might be one of those things. Goodhue County Sheriff's Office, Zimbrota Ambulance, and Mazeppa Fire Department. Whereas, if it's a medical call up here in Cannon Falls, it might very well be the Cannon Falls Police Department, the Cannon Falls Fire Department, the Cannon Falls Ambulance, right? And so that's kind of, if I actually put the map of all the zones on here, your eyes would go buggy. That's how detailed it is, because they overlap, and you have all these jurisdictions outside of Goodhue County that respond into Goodhue County because they have a zone that's set up. Who determines the zones? Well, typically law enforcement is based on a municipal government's boundaries, or the county boundaries, right? So the city of Cannon Falls, their law enforcement jurisdiction is in the city limits of Cannon Falls. Goodhue County Sheriff's Office, their jurisdiction is the whole county, right? The one thing that doesn't overlap is law enforcement jurisdiction. There's always a primary, of course there could always be a secondary. What do I mean by that? You have the Cannon Falls Police Department, right? But above that is the Sheriff's Office, and so there's some dual jurisdiction, but the primary agency always has the primary jurisdiction for all calls for service. Does that make sense? But yeah, it gets to be a lot. And what I did here is I just kind of used the graphics of all of the municipal and tribal government bodies in the county with their law enforcement backs.
So those grids, they're not like soil testing, you know, the grids are a certain size, but here it could be different sizes.
Yeah. And so that was, I mentioned that's how it works for law enforcement. So who determines EMS jurisdiction? Well, that is Minnesota's Emergency EMS Regulatory Board, right? And that changes at time. There's times where, you know, maybe nurse strand first responders want a little bit more jurisdiction up this way. So they go to the EMS Regulatory Board and their powers that be. They have to get township approval and they have to get the EMS Regulatory Board. I mean, there's a process to change those things. But that's kind of how that works. And so our systems then are built up to tell that dispatcher when they take that call, this is the agency that needs to go to this incident.
In your illustration there of Cannon Falls, law enforcement, that would be the primary agency then if it...
Within the city of Cannon Falls, yes.
All right.
Yep. Absolutely. And so, you know, I put the sheriff's office is kind of on the map here, but the sheriff's office currently has the contracts for the city of Goodhue. We have a contract with Belchester, city of Pine Island, and the city of Denison, where we provide contracting hours to those cities.
So, but in reference to Bob's question, Cannon Falls Police would be primary, the other two are secondary. Would they still get the dispatch or not?
Yeah, if Mitch were to ask for another car and there's no other Cannon Falls officer on, that next car in line would be a deputy. Yeah.
Okay.
In a complex investigation it may seem we're almost immediately reaching out to help from Goodhue County, even Dakota County sometimes, depending on where the resource is at. And
Yep.
same with fire. If there's a working house fire here, Cannon will get paged immediately, and their backup is Randolph. And it's almost immediate. Like if there's a house structure fire, they immediately page a backup right from Randolph, just another engine and people come, and it's just, you know, it's a hot button once in a while, or people talk about it. It's not really a hot button to us. That people talk about, well, do you go help them? Do they help you? We all help each other.
Yeah, we all help
It
each
is
other.
one big working machine.
Another example of that is, you know, the Highway 52 corridor that goes right through the county, right? So I talked about how accurate 911 calls are. Well, when we get in and fully deploy true next generation 911, the system has the ability to take this little sliver of roadway, including the right-of-way, and say any 911 calls made in that area go right to State Patrol dispatch. Because who has primary jurisdiction over an incident on a highway? The State Patrol, a state highway. Okay? So if you're in the right-of-way or you're on an on or off ramp and you call 911, we have the ability to send that, or the state has the ability to make that go right to State Patrol. So in the metro area today, they're actually doing that. If you're on a state highway in the metro area and you dial 911, it's going to ring into State Patrol 911 because they have the primary jurisdiction. That's how the metro has elected to do that. Outstate Minnesota has provided, the state has provided an option to the counties, meaning Sheriff Kelly, if someone calls 911 on 52, do you prefer to get that call into your dispatch center, or are you okay with it ringing right into State Patrol? Right? I can tell you today that we have elected to continue to allow those calls right on 52 to ring into us. Why?
Really?
Because if it rings into State Patrol, typically it's an accident, potentially injuries, potentially a fire.
Time issue.
And guess what? State Patrol is then going to have to call Goodhue County to get services going. Whereas if it rings right into Goodhue County, we now know about it. We can get fire and EMS going a few minutes, sometimes seconds, sooner than yet having another jump. And then we transfer the call to State Patrol so they can get the law enforcement response.
That's a life and death situation right
Yeah, and in the metro they do it different, because in the metro that works, and they're okay with doing it the way they do it. So I know that's how we elected in Goodhue County, but there are some counties, and Olmsted is going to be one of them, that they have elected to allow those calls on state highways to ring in the state patrol. And if they need fire EMS, then state patrol will then call Olmsted County to request them page those services. But that's how kind of neat and accurate it, true next gen 911 will be when it comes.
Going back to my question again, so the primary is Cannon. Does the ambulance service and our fire department get the dispatch too, or not?
If it's a call where they're be required to respond to, yeah, that would be dispatched as well. Yep, and the ambulance service and the fire service have quite a bit. I think EMS, Cannon Falls is quite a bit. Zumbrota Ambulance has a large service area. And then Red Wing Ambulance has got a decent service area that actually extends into Wisconsin.
People forget how big those EMS areas are, because you could put a pin of fire departments up there. You got Randolph, Maysville, Cannon, Wanamago, Goodhue, they all have fire departments. But the ambulance service goes from Cannon to Hastings, and they meet in the middle. To Red Wing, they meet in the middle. To Zumbrota, I mean, they're very large areas. So, like, the ambulance works with a lot of different fire departments, because they kind of cross into their areas.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like you said, if you put that map up there showing everybody's areas, like, we'll put blue for EMS, and we'll put this for fire, and this for, it would, like you said, it'd be a crazy map, because they're all crossing and jiving. And that's their good thing they do that. Village.
Yeah.
It's a lot to manage.
So let's talk about making a call to 911. I would imagine a few of you have done that in a time or two. Right? You've called 911? No, never?
Never.
Good for you.
Never? I
Okay.
gotta be with you.
If the day comes where you do have to call 911, here's some nice things to know. All 911 calls are free. You'll never be charged for a 911 call. In fact, you're already paying for 911 services. If you look at your phone bill today, your cell phone bill, when you go down to where all the taxes and all the extra fees are on there, there'll be a fee that says Minnesota, something like Minnesota 911 fee. That's what you're paying for. Those 911 fees are collected by the state, and then the state distributes those to all the 911 centers in the state to pay for all the operational expenses to process a 911 call. In Goodhue County, in fact, statewide, as of 2024, wireless calls made up 85 to 90% of the total 911 calls. When I say wireless, I mean a cell phone, okay? 85 to 90%. How many of you still have a landline at home? Yeah? Bob does? Huh?
Just dropped it this year.
Yeah. When are you gonna drop it?
Well, my cell phone dropped me out there.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Good point.
So you walk into the house and your cell phone goes offline, so you have to have the landline. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and that number continuously creeps up year over year over year. And I'll get into the weeds on a little bit more of that. Calls are completed within 8 seconds. When you dial 911, it just doesn't go from here to Red Wing into the 911 center, and it just connects, poof, right? Your phone call can go all the way to Miami, Florida, to Colorado, through the nationwide 911 network, back to Minnesota, through the system, into the respective PSAP, or 911 center. It's a big convoluted mess, and when I look at the map, I'm like, I don't even understand it at times anyhow, but I go, okay, right? So it can take up to 8 seconds before it actually rings when you dial 911. But they're automatically routed via 911 trunk lines across the nation into the PSAP, or the 911 center that provides services for the area in which the call was placed.
So this is all wire, it's not satellite.
It's all wire.
All
Yeah.
wire.
There might be some systems with backhaul that use some satellite technology. For the most part, it's all wire, or now IP based. So, and of course, we know IP systems can go through satellite. Yep. Now this is, I'm really gonna throw a wrench at you. Annie Alley's received. And you're like, what the hell is Annie Alley, right? I'll talk about that here. So Annie Alley, I call it kind of old school location information. ANI refers to automatic number identifier. So the phone number of the device used to place 911 is displayed on the screen for the dispatcher, right? So that's, hey, they at least have the phone number you're calling from. Technology's been around a long time. ANI Alley, you get the location information. This is the location information is delivered to the PSAP within 2 seconds. And this is kind of, remember I mentioned using Google and Android, right? This is technology before that that's been around a long time that has gone through two phases. There's wireless phase 1 technology and wireless phase 2 technology. Wireless anti-alley information for phase 1. If you call 911 and this happened to be a cell phone caller that called, I blocked out the number for privacy reasons, and it tells me that it's a wireless phase 1 call, okay, and this is what the dispatcher sees on their screen. It tells me that it's coming off the Verizon wireless cell phone tower located at 470 Tyler Road South. Here's the lat and long for that cell tower. It tells me that the 911 center, the public safety answering point, is the Goodhue County Sheriff's Office, right? And it always reminds the call taker, verify the caller location and callback number. This has been around since, the late 90s. Not very accurate. Okay, so I know that someone that is in maybe the 5-mile range of that cell phone tower called 911. Doesn't tell me exactly where they are. So as the note says there, it displays the phone number, the cell phone, and the location of the cell tower where the call originated. So here's a phase 2 call, right? Wireless phase 2 call, March 6th of this year. And this was a person on a T-Mobile cell phone device, and these two numbers are just trumped numbers that mean nothing. I blocked out the phone number for their privacy. It tells me that it was off the cell tower located off County Road 11 in Goodhue County. It gives me the lat and long. It gives me the PSAP, and it gives a lot of the same information over here. The difference here is this displays the phone number of the cell phone and the actual lat and long as determined by the wireless carrier's position determination equipment. Well, what the hell does that mean, right? Basically, phase 2, the cell carriers were able to say it's in this coordination, and based on our equipment, we think it's about 500 meters out from where the antenna is to where their phone is. And so it gathers that and says, we think here's the lat and long of that caller. Now, we all know, and Mitch was probably had this, still not very accurate. Yeah, we have a little bit more general area. At least if I'm a cell tower, I know it's in this direction, right? But it doesn't tell me where. It could be 3, 4, 5 miles out. And so that is what wireless phase 1 and phase 2 technology look like, and it continues to improve. Now here's another issue that we run into. Here's a landline call, right? So Bob's at home, he calls 911. It rings in, and this one I actually stole from Scott County. But this is the phone number that called. It comes back to an address of 103 Park Street in Minnesota, Elko New Market. Looks like Sprint or SRT is the telephone carrier. The 911 dispatch center, the PSAP, Scott County. It's Elko New Market Police Department, and a line of ambulance for that particular address. A little bit more accurate because it's landline, and the landline provider, whether it be Frontier or whomever, Bevcom, they can manually enter this in. But again, less than 10% of our calls that come into 911 now are landline. Does anyone know what VoIP means? Voice over IP, right? Kind of like a landline, but it's based on IP. It's like an internet phone. I don't know what kind of phone system you have in this building, but a lot of businesses and corporations have VoIP phones. And they're basically plugging into the internet. It's not a landline. It is a landline, but it ain't a landline. It's internet based. If I took that VoIP phone from my office and I went home and plugged into my home internet, it's the same phone number. It uses the internet as the backhaul. And so these are only accurate as much as the VoIP provider puts the location in. But here's the problem. I just mentioned that I could take my office phone home to my home, plug it in. If I call 911 when I'm at home, it's going to give the address of my office, right? That's kind of a problem. Here's a really good one. On March 6th at 4:40 a.m. in Red Wing, from the Holiday Inn Express at 1851 Old West Main, someone called 911. Okay, God knows why. And there's a lat long provided here of the hotel. The 911 center is the sheriff's office. It tells them this is a VoIP 911 call. Again, verify caller information. So at least we have the business and the address. But on VoIP systems, how many phones does a hotel have?
One per room.
Yeah. So how do you know which room that even came from? All we know is that there was a 911 call from that business. And so Statutorily, the language is slowly changing and catching up to the technology, requiring any businesses or even private entities that are using VoIP service to also provide the location of where that VoIP phone is at. The problem with that is, as I just told you, is the new age we're in where everyone works remote. Their businesses are giving them a remote VoIP phone to take home, so when you call, you think you're calling their office, but they may be sitting in their basement working. And how do you constantly keep that updated when they're moving that phone around? It's a little challenging. The good news is 85 to 90% of 911 calls are on cell phone, right? Did I lose anyone there? Questions? How to use 911. This is like some nice little kindergarten stuff here that I use, right? You dial 911 right on your phone. Pretty self-explanatory. And for those that haven't, if you ever do, don't panic, remain calm. The dispatchers are trained to do the same with you. Do not hang up. Even if you accidentally dial 911, never hang up, stay on the line. Answer all the questions at the public safety telecommunicator, a new term now, which means dispatcher, and give your address and location, right? Your address and location always needs to be verified, even though the dispatcher might have on their screen that brand new Google and Apple location that pops up. They're always going to ask some basic questions like that. Sorry, it was an accidental call. How many of you have a smartwatch? Okay, have you ever fallen?
Yeah.
Has it called 911?
No, it said, do you need help? And
You
I
said
was
no?
laying there in the snow and the ice, hit my head, and I said, no.
Oh.
I mean, what are you gonna say? You're gonna say,
I've fallen and I
No.
can't get up.
yes, no.
You could have said yes, and your watch would have called,
The
right?
watch would have called my daughter in
Okay.
Columbus, Ohio, and she would have called you.
And a lot of them, based on how you have it setting, smartwatches detect when you fall, and therefore it will automatically call 911, right?
Oh,
And so
maybe.
that, if you have an Apple Watch, it's certainly capable, and a lot of the other ones are smart. Here's the problem with that, right?
Oh, okay.
When Apple put this technology out there and was the first company to do that, guess what we have in our county that people fall down all the time on, and because they're wearing so much gear, they don't realize their watch called 911.
That's right.
Welch Ski Hill, right? And so
Yeah.
every time someone falls a little bit at Welch Ski Hill and they're all bundled up and their watch is in there, their watch is calling 911, the dispatcher goes, oh, look, it plotted right here on the hill. Hello, 911, nobody says anything. Hello, nobody's there, right? Because they don't know their watch called 911. So every year we get hundreds of accidental 911 calls from Welch Ski
Oh,
because someone didn't know. But there's other times where people accidentally call 911. Let's see, what's my next slide here? So our dispatchers have a lot of different ways they can handle a 911 call. If it's an abandoned 911 call, what that means is someone has started that 911 call, but then they hung up. That will pop up on the dispatcher's screen. It says abandoned 911 call. And they will follow up on every single abandoned 911 call just to ensure it was indeed abandoned. And they can do that one of two ways. The old-fashioned way is to make a phone call back. Hey, we look like we were getting a 911 call from you. Is everything okay? Right? And people say yes or no. The other way is, now we have another system that we can send a text to that abandoned 911 phone number. So they get a text message that says, hey, this is Goodhue County 911. We appear to receive a message. Do you have an emergency or not? And they can respond back, yes or no, right? And if you do, please call 911 again. And so they can close a lot of those abandoned calls out just by text. And to believe it or not, we get a lot of other ones from students in classrooms that accidentally, for whatever reason, they hit the two buttons on the side of their phone and it called 911, or God knows what. And a lot of folks, sorry, I'm in class, I accidentally dialed it. No issue, sorry, you know, and so we close a lot of those out. But every single abandoned call, just like a 911 hang-up call, we follow up on, our team follows up on
That'd be
it.
a tough one to follow up because of what's going on sometimes in schools, right? You
Sure,
gotta
yeah.
follow it up.
Yeah. So, with that, the public safety telecommunicators role, that's a big term, isn't it, right? Public safety telecommunicator, that's a 911 dispatcher. In the last 3 years, there's been, both at the statewide and nation wide level, we need to elevate our dispatchers to more of a professional career role. Instead of just being a dispatcher that's classified as clerical, we want to formalize that, because I always say they're the true first responders. Mitch is not going anywhere unless a first responder before him takes the call and knows where to send him, right? And so, my
Is
things,
it you or me?
that's my phone, that's
Thank you.
my alarm's going off at our tower sites that come and go.
Okay.
And so, we now call them public safety telecommunicators. It's a state recognized term for that position, and it's also a national recognized term, okay? So what is their job? Their job looks a lot like this, right? They're not playing video games, they're not watching YouTube, even though it looks like it. But they receive and process all incoming 911 calls and non-emergency telephone calls. So you call the sheriff's office or you call the non-emergency number, you're gonna get someone that's sitting at a chair like this in that exact position. And then they dispatch emergency and non-emergency calls for police, fire, and ambulance. They utilize various computer systems to access and enter information. And they perform this work at a high level of accuracy with attention to detail and multitasking skills. They receive, transmit, and monitor many radio channels, and they have to maintain the ability to remain calm in periods of high stress and adapt to changing conditions. And they have to make sure they're maintaining both public and responder safety. That sounds like a lot, right? I will tell you, 50% of us can do this job and 50% of us cannot. And 95% of our citizens think it's one thing, and then they get in there and they go, that's not what I thought being a dispatcher is. And here's what I mean by that. Out of all the folks we hire, 50% of them we hire can do it, 50% get halfway through training and either admit, I can't do this, or they are not meeting that expectation that we set, right? So some people said, well, Chad, it seems like you set an unrealistic expectation. Well, I don't know, if you call having a heart attack, do you want someone who just barely meets the expectation, or do you want someone who knows what the hell they're doing, right? I'll take the latter, right? And so it's very, very difficult. They get very overwhelmed very quickly. Whether you have 2 working, which is our minimum staffing numbers, our optimal staffing is 2, and at the best times we have 4 on duty. But you can't plan for everything. It's unrealistic to make the taxpayers 10 for 10 people on at a time, even though there are times where we get so busy in the county with so many different incidents, man, that'd be great to have 10, but that's not realistic, right? And so we plan, we train, and they are constantly managing that. And I always, granted, when I was a dispatcher here in Cannon Falls, it was kind of old school. It was 1 telephone with 2 lines and 1 radio, and I think the computer we had, all we could do was run a license plate on it. It was very what I call old school. It's a whole different world now with technology and stuff. It is crazy. There's a lot thrown at them. And if you're a video gamer, you might make a really good dispatcher is what I tell folks.
What's the salary range for people that go into that line of work?
Well, it varies across the country, right? In the sheriff's office, we start at like $24 an hour, and then there's a 12-step scale, and they're on the same scale as our detention deputies are. So you won't get rich doing this job, but a person definitely can live comfortably, I would say. Because then you also get county benefits and things like that.
For that experienced person, how much has he moved up to?
Well, I mean, they're starting in that 40,000 range. Our supervisors are just shy of 100,000 a year because they're at the top of the pay scale after they hit that grade 12 in Goodhue County. So you can do the job and make it a career. I call it a career versus a job all the time because we have staff. And I will toot Goodhue County's horn here a little bit because we are fortunate that the folks we have been with us a long time. Well over half of our folks have been with us for 20 plus years. Right? We recently had Wayne Betcher, if that name rings a bell to anyone. Wayne just retired after 34 years. The next one in line retires in 2 years, and she's got 31 or 32 years in. So we have a lot of longevity in our dispatch center, but we work hard to keep folks and provide the best environment we can based on the stress of the
Are
job.
they on 8-hour shifts or 10 hours?
So they work in 11 and a half hours.
Oh, no.
Yep, and so let's see, it's Wednesday. So 1 week you work Wednesday, Thursday, 11 and a half hours, right? You were off Monday, Tuesday. After tomorrow's shift, they're off Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So 1 week you work 2 11 and a half hour shifts. The next week, that same person will come back and work Monday, Tuesday, 11.5 hours, be off Wednesday, Thursday, and then come back and work Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 11.5 hours. So in a 2-week pay period, it's 80.5 hours is what our folks work. And there's always opportunities for overtime, right? Because we have to accommodate staff that are out on sick time or comp time or vacation or whatever else, right? So, and they like that schedule. You know, I entertain, hey, well, maybe we just change this. Don't dare you.
That
You know,
business
so-
time goes pretty fast, because
It can.
you're just tied up, I mean, you're working all the time.
Yeah, there's days that I think go really fast, and there's days where maybe they twiddle their thumbs a
Don't
little
get
bit.
any calls.
But you know, when they're not getting a lot of calls, I mean, it's always somewhat steady. They're never truly bored, because when there is downtime, there's a lot of online training that we accomplish. There's a lot of different procedures and protocols that the supervisors are encouraging.
Just in the last
Staff to
24
review.
hours, there's 280 records made on ICRs just in Goodhue County. So they've received at least, probably more than that, 'cause I make an ICR on every phone call.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, you could argue there's probably,
Double
there's
that.
280 that, oh, there's probably 400 phone calls that came into that center. Just in the last
I
20,
don't
that's
know.
just in a quiet April day on Monday or Tuesday, you know, what is it, Wednesday day?
Yeah,
That's not
that's
a
about-
busy summer, you know what I mean, so.
About 12 to 15 hour calls an hour.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, yeah,
I just
easy.
ran that data right now on my computer, you can pull it all, and that's
Time's
just
going really
today.
fast when you're doing that.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Yeah,
more
there-
than
there's
people-
days that go really fast, and then by the end of the shift, they're like, oh gosh, we're glad to get out of here. It's been crazy.
Yeah.
And sometimes it goes down to what, 2 is minimum?
Yep, we never go
And
less
that's-
than 2 anymore, yeah.
That's minimum, I mean, you can't operate less than that, or they're in trouble, because you gotta take a bathroom break too.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking.
That's the thing.
Anyway, where's the, what building is it in?
The Law Enforcement Center in Red Wing.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
like in the administrative side, or?
Yep, we're on the top floor, just off from the Emergency Operations Center.
Somebody wanted to go into that type of work, where would they go to find employment? How would they search that?
Yeah, so there's, you know, and that's kind of evolving because, you know, we keep saying we want to make it a career position, but you don't go to college to be a dispatcher. You don't go, you know, there's no really career track for that particular role. And so in the last couple of years, there's been a big push through a couple organizations such as NENA, which is National Emergency Number Association, to create some kind of structured course that we can bring into the high schools. And then APCO, the National Association of Public Safety Communication Officials, is doing the same thing. And to try to entice high school students, because right now today you need a high school degree to be able to do the job. And you gotta have those things it's hard to train for, the ability to multitask and remain calm under pressure, right? And that's a hard thing to train on, right? But there's not like, hey, I'm going to college to be a dispatcher, that's not a
Right.
thing, and so.
But let's say you need somebody, how do you get the word out to people that you're looking for somebody?
Today, we use a lot of different options. Of course, just like we post for every job in the county, we follow that track. But the state has also created a site saying 911 is your calling, and there's a website where every single dispatch center in the county can submit their posting to the state, and they put it on that website. I didn't bring any, I should have, shame on me, but I have little flyers, little postcards that we hand out at different events that has that website on there and has that information on there. And actually, that's really kind of, that's been very successful for us. I know the state just did a survey to say, do you guys want this to continue? And I'm like, yeah, that is great, right? Because to be able to put it out there, everyone can kind of look and pick their choosing on where they want to go work. I think we're very fortunate in Goodhue County. I mentioned that we have a lot of longevity, but we're fully staffed. A couple weeks ago, I was at a meeting of the Southeast Minnesota 911 dispatch supervisors. I attended this meeting, and I was surprised to hear that we are one of 3 out of the 15 counties in our region that are fully staffed. Everyone else is struggling. Winona County's down 4 people, right? 4 people out of 12 is a lot of people. So I think it was us, Dodge County, and Wabasha were fully staffed, but now I just see as of yesterday, Wabasha posted for a public safety telecommunicator, so they must now be down at least 1, right? We don't have a ton of turnover. We've had some retirements, but in 2024, the county board also authorized us for 2 more full-time public safety telecommunicators, based on the statistics that the sheriff and I brought to the county board saying, we need 2 more people. So we are an authorized strength of 14 full-time public safety telecommunicators. 4 of those are supervisors, there's 1 in each shift.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Maybe you covered this, but if I call in a non-emergency number, does it go to a 911 dispatcher?
Yes. Yep. Yep. And so what happens when both phones are ringing at the same time? Which one do you think they pick? 911, right? So this is what their workstations look like. They have, there's the 911 radio computer. And these 3 monitors, these 2 large ones and the one in the center, are where our CAD, computer-aided dispatching, and all the other internet stuff that you do on the computer is located. And then this one is solely statewide radio system, where they just go up there, they click, and when they click, they transmit on whatever channel they're selected, kind of thing. Every station has a little bolt light. If you ever come down to Red Wing, look me up, I'll give you a tour. Every station has a little bolt light. It has a green, yellow, and a red, right? We're not directing traffic in there necessarily, but what these indicate is, in the dispatch center, each workstation, if the red is on, the dispatcher is transmitting on the radio. If the green is on, that means they're on a phone call. Okay. Yellow we don't utilize, but yellow there's a little button on their positions that they can turn on. And typically in a larger center, they would turn those on so the supervisor on duty looking across the dispatch floor can see if someone needs help with something. So a lot of technology involved there. And so this is going to be me tooting the horn of our staff, right? And not just our staff, just staff in general that answer 911 calls. So how many of you can say this? Today I made life and death decisions, educated a citizen, helped keep law enforcement officers safe, prevented a suicide, sent help to a serious car accident, helped find a lost child, assisted in catching a crook, was a friend to a total stranger, calmed a frantic victim, directed a helicopter to a serious emergency, stayed on the phone to comfort a parent, stopped a crime, stayed calm when an officer or citizen asked for the impossible, protected your community, gave someone the rest of their life, reunited a family with their lost dog, recovered a stolen vehicle, instructed someone on CPR, and it worked, she's alive, told the cop where to go, and they went. Made sure the firefighters got to the raging fire, gave someone a hug via the phone, worked with a great team, worked with heroes, saved lives, made a difference. And that's no exaggeration. I don't know who wrote that. I assume that comes from someone who actually is a 911 dispatcher. But when I first saw this graphic, I thought that is spot on. You know, and I can say that because my office sits just off the floor of the dispatch center. So when my door is open, I can hear everything that they're dealing with. And I hear all this on a daily basis. And so I think that's really cool. And I think sometimes we forget how important their radio or their work is. So that is 911 in general. I can continue on if Rosa gives me the ability to do that, because I'll talk a little bit about our statewide radio system. But before I do that, I want to answer, or I just want to give you a scenario. Someone mentioned how maybe, Chad, you can come and share some calls that, you know, have came in and stuff. Well, they're, you know, the stuff I could share with you, you wouldn't believe me, even though it's true, because there's such crazy stuff in the world that happens. But I'm going to go back to the day when I actually answered the phone as a dispatcher right here in Cannon Falls. And I won't use the name of the individual I'm referring to. But with that being said, one of the funniest things I've ever had happen as I was a dispatcher here in Cannon Falls, sitting at the desk down there at the Public Safety Building, we had a reserve officer that was in painting the walls. Freshening up the dispatch center, they're painting the walls in this little room we're in down there. And he was teetering on a chair. And I'm like, hey, you might not want to do that because you're probably going to fall, right? Well, what do you think happened about 5 minutes later? He fell, and not only did he fall so hard, he fractured his tailbone, okay? So as he's sitting on the floor here, you know, crying around about his tailbone hurting, right, because he just fell, he's like, hey, I need an ambulance. Well, who do you think's job is it to page an ambulance in the city? And of course, I was struggling with that because it was so damn fun to get go. I'm like, how am I going to page an ambulance? I'm going to laugh my tail off, right? You know, no pun intended there. But I had to do it, so I paged Cannon Falls ambulance, and I should have saved the recording because I could barely keep myself together just paging for that ambulance to come help the guy right next to me who, you know, fell on his butt and hurt his tailbone. Long story short, they showed up, you know, because I had to page them to dispatch to help someone who has a so they're probably going, what in the world, right? You know, so
What do you,
it's kind of funny.
frivolous calls? Somebody calls in to get a cat of a tree and know what happens, right?
Yeah, we send the
You know, all
heroes.
kinds of stuff like that. Is there any penalty to people that do that?
There is some state statute when it comes to interfering now, some updated statute even, interfering with 911 caller or a 911 dispatcher in the process of a call. But it's far and few between, actually. We just don't get a whole lot of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if they're blatantly false, there's that false reporting stuff in the crime, but we don't want to discourage people from calling,
Yeah.
because that's a slippery slope too. We'd rather you call and it be nothing, you know, than, yeah. So no, the false stuff is far and few.
Yeah,
They're there.
it's pretty far and few between when we get that stuff,
good.
you know. The biggest thing nowadays, have you heard of swatting?
Yes.
Swatting is where you call 911 and you make up a BS call that, hey, there's a guy in here with a gun and took this, or then cops and everyone get there and it was bogus.
That's pretty serious.
That is very serious.
Yeah.
And nowadays with the technology that's out there, I can spoof my phone number to be Rosie and call dispatch, right? And so now they think Rosie called. I mean, the technology's out there. I can go on my app and do it on my phone in about 30 seconds. So it's not hard to spoof things and do that. And then for investigators to figure out who that actually was, it just makes it for a bigger, longer process to follow the technology and all that stuff to figure out who that actually was.
Is that very common?
We have had swatting calls in Goodhue County, yes, absolutely. Off the top of my head, in the last 6 months, we've maybe had 3 different parts of the county for whatever reason. You know, typically politicians, people that are being targeted by one group or another are trying to get a response to their address, right?
Yeah, yes, this is Mike.
Here in Cannon, we have, I'd have to pull it up and actually find it. We've had them in Cannon, and yeah, they've been in Goodhue County, but.
And we kind of know too, you know, we have a couple individuals in Red Wing that we have a premise file note, which means we have a note under their address, so when the dispatcher types it in, hey, just, there's been threats, maybe a swatting call come at this address, so be skeptical. I heard one just the other day. And when I say just the other day, I think it was in the last week sometime. I was sitting in my office and I heard one of the dispatchers answer a 911 call, and she said, okay, I understand you just shot your brother. And sometimes they'll repeat that back so their partners around them can hear the call they're processing. It's okay. No, you'll be fine. And I heard her talking to this, what would be the suspect. You'll be just fine. We'll deal with this. It's okay. Let's move on. You know, take a deep breath. I understand, you know, you can get through this, you know, there'll be consequences kind of thing, but just bear with me. And no, do not shoot yourself. Stay on the phone with me. Talk to the officers. Please just wait till the officers get there. And that continued on and on and on. And I'm like, okay, that's a flag for me right away, just listening to that. I'm like, is this legitimate or not? There's not many bad people that call in. Well, I can't say that because there is. But it just was too... It was just something didn't seem right? And so the dispatcher out on the floor also caught on to that, and she's like, so they started trying to do the location track, because that was the other flag. It never popped up on the screen for any location. So that's flag number 1. Flag number 2 is it didn't really seem legitimate, and so long story short, it wasn't. Yes, it was a Red Wing address. We sent officers there. There's no issue. It wasn't BS call, right? But so you just kind of got to look for those inconsistencies, and that was one that they figured out, this is probably, because then the guy just hung up eventually, just disconnected. And she's like, oh, he disconnected. And then the supervisor's like, you know, it never popped up on here, and it's not popping up in any other location, so, you know, that happens occasionally. So. Do we want to talk briefly about the radio system? I have a few slides on that. I won't get too deep in the weeds. But in the state of Minnesota, we're on a statewide radio system known as the Armor radio system. Okay, it's a 800 megahertz radio. In Goodhue County alone, we have just over 1,300 subscriber units. That means 1,300 of these things, right? Whether it be a portable or a mobile in a fire truck, squad car, public works vehicle, you name it. And the nice thing about the statewide radio system is it provides users of the radio system with statewide coverage and interoperable communications anywhere you're at in the state of Minnesota. And our state is made up of regions, And each region has their own emergency communications board, which makes all the governance decisions on how the system will operate. So this gets really technical, so I won't get that technical. But what you're looking at here is Goodhue County, and all these green boxes are the radio towers in Goodhue County for the statewide radio system. There's 9 total, and we have a simulcast system. A simulcast system means all 9 of those sites act as one. So when I key up my radio and it goes to the tower, all 9 of those light up at the exact same time. And so that's what a simulcast system is, and that's kind of what it looks like. All of our sites across the state, including Goodhue County, are monitored 24/7 for a whole host of alarms. The dinging that you kept hearing on my watch, that was some alarms. And I know what those are today because it's Wednesday, and on Wednesdays our generators at our tower sites turn on to do their weekly test and turn off, and I get alarms on them. Okay, but that's just one thing these sites are monitored for. We have they're monitored for equipment failures, equipment overheats, the general ambient temperature inside the shelter, you name it. Someone forces entry into the building, there's an alarm for that. So as you can imagine, all these are public safety critical radio tower locations. We don't want someone tampering with that, right? Here's what the inside of some of them towers look like. Oh, good God, what is all that, right? And this is what I do on the daily basis. In addition to overseeing our emergency management functions and our 911 center, I keep all this stuff working, okay, to the best I can. Goodhue County is a 9-site system. 5 of those sites are owned by the state of Minnesota. MnDOT Radio actually maintains them. 4 of the sites are owned by Goodhue County. Why do we own 4 and the state own 5? Because the backbone of the state radio system starts with MnDOT radio sites. Through the process over the last 20 years, and we've been on the system since 2010, as counties come online, they may have to add some additional sub-sites to provide good portable radio coverage. In Goodhue County, we have some interesting terrain in parts of the county, so we had to have 4 sites for a total of 9. Each one of these sites are valued at about $1.5 million, and that includes everything, because you got to buy the hardware, and then what comes with hardware nowadays? Software. What comes with software nowadays? Updates and ongoing subscriptions, and on and on and on, right? But this is what the inside of these shelters look like. There's all kind of communications equipment up and down the rows. There's backup batteries that keep the whole thing up and running if commercial power is lost, right? We could have a commercial power lost, and we build our sites to run on battery for up to 8 hours, right? Typically, they don't have to run on battery because within about a minute, that generator's up and speed and running as soon as that commercial power lost. So they're on batteries for a short period of time, it switches over. But that is all the stuff in some of the sites. Some have a little bit more than others. This one happens to be a picture of the inside of our Aspen site in Red Wing. And there's a rack here that is actually owned by Xcel Energy, which we have a partner with. And the Xcel Energy rack includes all of the equipment to monitor and activate and deactivate the sirens as it relates to a nuclear power incident. So, our annual operating cost just to keep all this online and operating is about $175,000 out of the levy dollars of our taxpayers in the county to keep all this online. Okay? Yes, that's a lot of money, but you know, public safety, number one, we all know costs money. 2, it's not just our police, fire, and EMS users. Public Works, our county highways on the system, all the transient users, state patrol, everyone who drives up and down 52, government vehicles, every radio that's on the system uses our system when they come into our county. Just like when we go all the way across the state, we use all the other people's systems, right? It's a big shared system. And we have to have communication with our responders, so it's keeping it up and alive and working is important. So here are all of our sites in Goodhue County, the county-owned sites. So it's 4 of those 9. They're actually on water towers. Now, why are they on water towers? Because it's cheaper to be on a water tower than it is for the county to stand up their own structure. Structure alone, if it's just the antenna, tower, like you see off 52 kind of behind the old Edgewood down there, that's MnDOT Cannon Falls site. That structure is $325,000 just for the structure. we're on city water towers, Cannon Falls being one of them. They don't charge us anything. They don't charge the county anything, which is good because we don't charge them anything to use the radio system, so it's a win-win. And so the infrastructure's already there. So you can see this is up in Red Wing. This is our Aspen water tower. There are cellular equipment up here, but a lot of these antenna whips are all public safety, and including this little dome is a microwave radio dish for the county radio system. And then here's a picture of the top of Sand Hill in Red Wing with a lot of the same equipment on it. Of course, some of this is Verizon Wireless, T-Mobile, but like the antennas, and I know it's hard to see, some of these antennas in here are ours. This dish is certainly ours. And so, how do I get these pictures? Well, part of my job is, as I mentioned, keeping all this working. I always do inspections a couple times a year to check all the coax cable, make sure the wind hasn't wrecked anything. I can zoom in with my camera, make sure everything's connected slightly. If I have an inspection or something that's not working, instead of climbing up the thing myself, now I just throw a drone in the air and zoom in, and that's how I get these pictures. Okay. I think they're kind of cool. Here's another view of these. Is this Sand Hill? Yeah, this is Sand Hill. Of course, again, a lot of this is cellular infrastructure, but like this dish here is ours, and all of that coax goes all the way down into the shelter that we maintain. One of these is a video. Hey, it's this one. So this is me when I was doing a tower inspection, just flying the drone. There's a lot of stuff up there, but the other flip side of that is I get to know the local cellular carriers and their local technicians because I run into them. And so we piggyback off them as well for a lot of different things. The downside about being on a water tower, having one of our radio sites on a water tower, is the city comes along, like Cannon Falls did a couple years ago, and said, we want to repaint this thing. And you got to take all that stuff off there. Well, taking all that stuff off there is not a cheap thing. It's about $100,000 to take it all off, put it on a temporary pole, so it can continue to provide the coverage that is required, and then take it off the temporary pole and put it back on the tower. It's a very expensive thing. So we did that in Cannon Falls a couple years ago, and it worked out. Let's see here, what else do we got? Here, this was actually a video I took when they repainted the tank in Cannon Falls recently. Here's our temporary pole. The benefit about having a commercial cellular carrier on the tower with our public safety radio equipment is they pay for this temporary pole and they just give it to us at no charge, which is great because that shaves us about 40 grand for us. So Verizon Wireless, this is their shelter right here. They erected this temporary pole. So our shelter's on the other side of the building. So we took all the stuff off, we put all our stuff on here, and then we had to run the coaxial all the way around, all the way up into the pole. And that's where it gets expensive. But this, I believe, is a video, which I did when they were building that. And I always try to document all our changes, right? Because if I get hit by a bus, someone like Mitch is going to have to figure it out. Right?
And in your building there, the pictures we saw before, all that electric.
That's all right in here. Yep, right in the shelter down there. Yep.
And then I look at that copper pipe and think, oh boy, copper thieves.
Yeah.
1,000-gallon tank.
Yep. And we even have alarms for copper thefts. So we have a grounding bar outside our shelters, and we actually had it stolen in Red Wing. I missed the guy by 4 minutes. I almost got there. I was just leaving the house in the morning. And I got an alarm, and it was copper theft alarm at Aspen site. Oh, son of a gun. So I hauled the mail to get there, and I had missed them. The stuff was still, dust was still settling. I thought, God darn it. And that was about a $4,000 repair to build all that back up, right? Luckily, it didn't take the site down, which was good, but we have to build up the grounding standards as well. So we rebuilt it, and at that point I said, you know what, I asked the county board for some funds to put cameras on the shelters as well. So now I have cameras on our shelters. So if you drive up to the Cannon Falls Water Tower, or a lot of residents walk their dog by, my watch goes off. I know when little Johnny's walking his dog, because it tells me it's detected a person, you know. So, but yeah, that's kind of that. I thought that was kind of cool, huh? Very last thing, this is one of the things, and I know I'm going beyond dispatch, so hopefully that's okay with you, is our mobile command and communications vehicle. Maybe we can line up a time to actually bring it up here,
that'd be
okay?
great.
So in August of 2024, we deployed our new upgraded vehicle. Our upgraded vehicle I started working on in March of 2020 when Sheriff Kelly said, Chad, we need to replace this 1986 International in the garage that can't go faster than 45 miles an hour up the hill. Going lights and siren, like people are passing us and we're trying to get to emergency, right? Like, hey. But it was just old and antiquated and had struggled running. And by the way, when we sold it to another agency, when they were leaving, the muffler fell off on the highway, I guess. Well, whoops, perfect timing, I guess. So I started working on that, and I'm like, okay. And Sheriff told me, he said, your job is to figure it all out. How to pay for it, how to build it, how to spec it, yada, yada, yada. Luckily, I had a lot of experience with a lot of different agencies and how they use their equipment. And I was dead set about, we're not gonna waste money. We're also not just gonna build something to build something. Because some of these agencies, I'm gonna throw Hennepin County under the bus, the biggest sheriff's office in the state. I went up there to look at their really fancy vehicle, I don't have a picture of it, and their lieutenant said, Chad, it's really just a warming house for us. I'm like, yeah, we're not gonna do that. I can have a school bus for a lot less cheaper than this thing, right? But my goal was I needed on-scene instant command and control, and communications, but I also wanted to take it a little bit further. I wanted to also have the ability to put a 911 dispatcher in there, a public safety telecommunicator, to answer 911 calls should we ever need to evacuate our building. And so that's how I built it, because I knew the technology was there. So here's just some other pictures. This is us at the Prairie Island Indian Community when we did the last FEMA exercise related to the nuclear power plant. So we park them right next to each other. We do a lot of communications work so we can ensure we can communicate into the plant, out of the plant. We have communication systems in these rigs that we can talk to the State Emergency Operations Center, to Wisconsin's Emergency Operations Center in Madison via radio. So we do a lot of stuff with that. Here's what we were looking to replace. So what did the sheriff have? Well, the sheriff's office had this trailer that was purchased in 2025. And it was a nice trailer, you know, decently equipped, but it was converted into a makeshift incident command center, right? And it served its purpose for, 15 years. The problem with it is technology from 2024 to 2020 had changed dramatically. And we couldn't add additional networking equipment in there. It didn't have sufficient power to power all the electronics. And the biggest problem is we needed a 1-ton truck to pull this thing around. The sheriff's office has 2 1-ton trucks in the fleet, right? And while they're available to us, they're usually staffed by 2 deputies that work in our water patrol division. And if they're out doing a task responding to an emergency and I needed this at the scene, I don't have another truck. Could I go to Public Works or find some private truck? Sure. But it sure would be nice to just get in something that we could drive, right? And we had that 1987 International that also went along with it, but it was even older than this thing. And so we wanted to replace this, and that's exactly what we did. Let me see here. So this is a picture of what we have today. So in March of 2020, I spent the first year figuring out I need a baseline of what this thing is going to cost. And so I knew of a couple manufacturers that builds command vehicles, so I went to them and I started speccing out at least minimum what I needed to know, so I had that baseline. Once I figured out how much I needed, then what is this thing doing? It's like translating what I say?
Yes, it is.
Wow.
I hadn't seen that before, so I was watching.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. So it's just one thing after another. Once I had a base price, I'm like, okay, now how are we going to pay for this thing, right? Because the county board's not going to raise taxes so I can buy a fancy truck, The good thing we had going at the time I was working on this in 2020, 2021 was COVID, right? And so there were some grant funds out there to ensure that continuity of government, continuity of 911 remained front and center. So we also have the Port of Red Wing on the Mississippi River, and we also get a lot of federal funding for all of our boats, anything related to the river, and cybersecurity. So the first thing we applied for was a $565,000 grant through FEMA Port Security Grant Program. We were awarded that, okay? Great. The truck's coming in at just under 800,000, so I still got some work to do. So then we went to the county board and we said, hey, we know there's some ARPA fundings, which is COVID funding. Can we get about 225 of that to pay for this vehicle? Here's what we're doing. So we went through some committee of the whole meetings at the county board, educated them on what we're trying to do, showed them CAD renderings, and they approved us that. Perfect. Now some of that technology, because it serves as our backup 911 center on wheels, I could use some of those 911 fund dollars from the state of Minnesota. So I accomplished that. So out the door, this truck cost us about $802,000. And yes, ultimately it's all your tax dollars, but the only amount that came out of the local levy here in Goodhue County was $8,000. And why just $8,000? Well, I did everything but think about the graphics. And at the end of the project, they're like, oh, how are you guys gonna graphic this thing? I'm like, oh, shoot, I forgot about the graphics. So I went to the graphic company and I said, how much are graphics gonna cost? $8,000. So I had to go back to county board and say, can I get $8,000 of tax dollars local so I can put graphics on this thing? And they approved it. So, you know, I did that. But that's the only picture I have available to you. On the other side of this truck, there's a slide out on it. You know, it's a Freightliner base truck diesel engine. It has a 25 kW diesel generator on board. What it's doing here is we have this asset in the sheriff's office that was purchased with public safety funds on a grant from the state. And this is a 20 kW generator with a light tower that we can pretty much power anything we need to, but we deploy that to scenes where we need lighting. And to exercise this generator, I can plug into our truck to exercise that. But our truck doesn't have to be plugged into anything. It is 100% self-efficient as long as there's diesel in the tank. It can run as long as it can be. During the fair week is the 1 week of the year we make sure it's out, and it's out for 5 days straight, burning up the midnight oil, right? It just sits there and runs and runs and runs and runs. But during the fair, we have staff in there the whole week, and we're staffing it, we're doing communications in there, we have deputies that will come in and cool down because it has HVAC systems, it has everything we need to communicate with everybody we possibly can, including, and I wish I had the pictures, I apologize, I don't on this slideshow. You've seen it in person. The back room's got 2 dispatch positions, just like I showed you that workstation. There's 2 of them in the back of this truck. So full 911 capabilities. Here's the other cool thing. Because in Goodhue County, we are on a regional 911 phone system. What does that mean? Well, instead of doing our own little thing, we partnered with 4 other counties. And us 4 counties got together and said, let's go on the same 911 system so we can all save a little money out of this deal. And so that's where we've been now the last 5 years. So what I'm saying is, if Winona County 911 were to go down, they could climb into our truck and they would have state 911 or state radio 911 systems. All they'd have to do is bring a laptop with their CAD and stuff like that on there. So we can serve all the counties up and down the river, including Olmsted, and shortly Dodge County is joining our radio system too. These counties don't know this yet, and I know he's recording, but once Dodge County gets on now, say, hey, we can be your backup, but man, we got to pay some bills on this thing once a year, right? And so we'll approach that bridge when the time comes, right? But that's a cool asset. I'm really proud of it because it took me a lot of time, and that thing will be in Goodhue County. It will be in the sheriff's office long after I'm retired. And so for that, I think it's kind of cool. And that's all I have for you.